All right. Hi. Thank you all for coming. I'm Jacob Estelle, and this is going to be a talk on how we moved one of our smaller OpenStack deployments from Juno release to Ocata release. So this will be sort of a case study on how Oath did it, formerly Yahoo, if you're not familiar with Oath. So I hope, though, that some of the general ideas you can still apply to some of you. And I really wish I didn't have to give this talk because I wish this was like giving a talk on this is how you run sudo yum upgrade. I wish it was that simple, but it's not. So you're going to have some sort of strategy. And before you have your strategy, you should look at exactly what you have in place right now. So what we had in place was this. Like I said, it was our smallest deployment of OpenStack. This was only being used so that like a new employee could come in, boot up a VM, and start writing code on that VM right away. So it was about 20K cores across 4 locations, all just very, very bare bones kind of OpenStack. You just got like your Nova, your Glance, your Keystone, and Horizon for convenience only. And it was all on Juno, on RHEL 6. And the MySQL DB was just a vanilla. But also, there were other things, and you may have other things too, besides the core OpenStack components. Like we wrote a user syncer that ensures if you have an account at our company, then you will immediately have an account in Keystone, so people can use this right away. So you got to look at each of these things and think, how am I going to get these to where they need to be? The user syncer, if it's using OpenStack clients, you need to ensure it works with the newer versions of the clients and the newer APIs. The DB, obviously the DB is the Juno version, so you need to upgrade it to the Ocata version. You also got to consider things that sort of have nothing to do with OpenStack, like RHEL. RHEL 6 only supported up to some old version of Libvirt, and Ocata didn't work with that version of Libvirt. So we had to upgrade to RHEL 7. And of course, if you're upgrading to Ocata, you have to have some way of deploying Ocata. So which of these things should we do first? Probably the one that has nothing to do with OpenStack, since that's kind of a solved problem already. So our high-level strategy, we'll start with the reimaging from RHEL 6 to RHEL 7 for the hypervisors. All right, so you go in, you reimage your hypervisor. It destroys all of the user's instances. You're good to go. No, there's some strategy there too. But what's neat about doing this first is you can do it months in advance, and you can keep Juno on that and hold off upgrading to Ocata as long as you can. But when it is time to go to Ocata, the general strategy that we had in place was take down Juno, reimage, destroy it. Okay, so Juno's down now. No new calls are coming in to the DB. Perfect time to migrate the DB. So upgrade it. You have an Ocata DB now. So perfect time to deploy Ocata. And they should all be talking and working together. Just repeat those steps for each cluster, and you're done. All right, thanks for coming to my talk. All right, so let's dive into that first one. Like I said, you have to have a strategy. You have to make sure it's not destructive. You're not destroying everyone's VMs. In our case, we had all of the VMs on disk. So our strategy was have them on a special partition, and when you reimage, the reimaging strategy will only wipe out everything but that partition. And so then you have like a clean rel 7 piece where you deploy Juno now, and you have all the instances safe on that partition. So when there's thousands of hypervisors, actually, especially when there's thousands of hypervisors, but really anytime you're doing something more than once, you should automate it, okay? So if you're doing something like going in, moving instances to partitions, reimaging, or like deploying Juno, that should all be, you should have an automated way to do all of that. And for us, this was our big source of downtime because it's simple. If the hypervisor is down, the VM running on it is down. So that was sort of, it's maybe avoidable in some cases if you do something fancy, like if you have Ceph and you juggle instances around. But for us, we decided that we can take these down and just warn our customers in advance. But yeah, that was pretty much the only downtime on VMs. All right, so this is good. Now it's time to actually go to Ocata. All right, so like I said before, take down Juno. Stop all of the OpenStack components and anything else you might have running, like our user syncer. Okay, so now, like I said before, no new calls coming into the DB. Perfect time to do the DB migration. So you run your DB migration and it fails because you haven't cleaned up the DB yet. If there are Nova instances stuck in a transitioning state, the DB migration will just fail. So you have to go in first, clean up those instances stuck in the transitioning state, or else it will fail. Also, another optional cleanup that you can do with the DB is delete all of the deleted rows. So like when you Nova delete something, it doesn't actually get deleted in the DB, it just gets marked deleted. But you can actually go in and remove those rows. And what that does is that means that's a lot less data for the migration scripts to even consider. So it speeds up the DB migration a lot. And now it's the perfect time to migrate the DB to Ocata. I'll go into that later. All right, you have an Ocata DB. Now it's time to deploy Ocata. This really has nothing to do with upgrades, by the way. So we're re-imaging to rel 7, our control plane, wiping it out. It's just a fresh host. And then you're deploying Ocata. You can use whatever deployment strategy you want. I think this is kind of a solved problem at this point. We used Chef and Screwdriver. Other people might use Cola or Ansible. The only special case is where you're not wiping everything out and redeploying. So remember, those hypervisors are still running Juno, and we didn't wipe those again. They're already running rel 7. So as long as your deployment strategy is smart enough to clean up, disable, remove all of that Juno Nova compute stuff before installing and starting its stealth there, you're good. And that really only applies to Nova compute in this case. But the rest is pretty straightforward. You're just deploying Ocata. All right, so Ocata is deployed. Ocata DB is in place. It's probably already started because your deployment strategy starts it, but start it if you haven't already. And make sure everything works. Use your Remember, you're probably doing this all the time, right? Automatically, making sure your cluster works using something like Tempest, although we use our own custom checks in this case. So everything works. You can add it to that Horizon dashboard, and people can start using it right away. All right. So let's back up. I skimmed over the DB upgrade. OK, so why do I have to have a slide for this? A strategy to do a DB migration? Kind of weird. OK, but it's because no one ever designed this to happen, OK? They never intended you to go from Juno to Ocata. When they wrote Juno, they didn't intend it because Ocata didn't exist. And when they wrote Ocata, they didn't intend this for whatever reason. So what is supported? What does upstream support? They support going from Juno to Kilo, from Kilo to Liberty, one step at a time. OK, so if you can go one step at a time, then just step by step upgrade to any version that you want. The pseudocode might look something like this. For each release, git pull down that tag, install it into a virtual environment, run, manage DB sync, and it bumps you up to that version of the DB. Pull it down, install the virtual environment, run it again. It bumps up your DB version again, and just keep doing this. OK, so you can kind of picture that in your head, oh yeah, that's a pretty simple bash script. I got this. But there's complications with this. For one, I just said pull down Kilo and install it. So it may not come as a surprise. You can't do that. If you git pull down right now the Kilo tag of, say, Keystone, and try to pip install it into a virtual environment using the Kilo upper constraints, those versions of the packages, it'll fail. The packages are broken now or missing. And it will be like that forever. It'll always be broken because Kilo is not supported anymore. So, like I said, you should automate everything. So when you're writing this script, it also has to take care of now, annoyingly, all of these broken package versions. And it's pretty much just like whack-a-mole. You install it, something fails. All right, change that version, try it again, and keep doing that, which is pretty annoying. Also, I said the pseudocode was run db sync, and it bumps you up. That's not true. Actually, there's other commands you need to run, and they need to be ran in a certain order. What commands are those, and what order they need to be ran in? I have no idea. You pretty much have to research every single component's update or release notes for every single version. And why? Why can't there just be a single command that bumps you up to the newest version? But that's the way it is. So you have to do that research and put it into your automation. And I think that comes from, that's just a symptom of a larger expectation that is had, I think especially with Nova, that no one's going to try this. No one's going to go from Juno to Ocata. They're going to go from Juno to Kilo, and then they're going to bring up their cluster. And we've written some code that sort of finishes the migration while your cluster is online and running. But if you want to do this without bringing up your cluster, we've written this extra command for you to run. OK, so that doesn't really make sense, I guess. So now there's an extra command I have to run. There's an extra command the devs have to write. And there's an extra command for the devs to forget to write, which was the case in, for example, Kilo Nova. there is a new column in the compute nodes table called host. And host is null by default. And there's no Nova manage command you can run that will populate that. And it causes a bunch of problems. And this will be broken forever. Like I said, Kilo will never be fixed. It's deprecated. So it's a simple fix. In this case, you just run like one MySQL query and you can populate it. But that kind of sucks. All right, so that's the DB migration. What else did we do? So you may have other things. We had a ton of other things that made it harder to do this migration. Mainly configuration, plugins, and patches. Configuration, you probably all have custom configuration. Between Juno and Ocata, like take the Nova conf, for example, it says all this stuff that you like and you want your Nova to do. And then the Ocata one says the exact same thing, but it's different. So you have to, I think in our case, we just rewrote all of it. It took quite a while. I think they're working now, though, on tools that will do this migration for you automatically, but I don't think those exist yet. And then in our case, since we customize everything, we also had plugins that interacted with the code, and we've also patched upstream directly. And there's no automated way to deal with this. You pretty much just have to rewrite your code to work with the newer versions, which is good motivation to not have so many patches, because it makes this a lot harder. Okay, so also, if you were on a really old release, like I think originally we came from like Folsom, you're maybe running Nova Network. Now in Ocata, the expectation you should have is that in Ocata, I'm going to be running Cells v2. Cells v2 doesn't work with Nova Network. So it's time to do the Nova Network to Neutron migration. I think CERN's been working on this for some years now. So it's complicated anyway, on top of all this other stuff you have to deal with. Let's be lazy and just put it off for now. So that's what we did in our case. We did some minimal patching to Nova, and it just works. It may be because we have a custom Nova Network manager, and we're only using one cell in Cells v2. But just know that it is possible to put off that work if you're facing all of these migrations at the same time. All right, so we're done. Let's look at where we were and what we did. I think we did pretty well. Downtime was as minimal, I think, as it could be. Like I said, if you're re-imaging a host, the host is going to be down for the re-imaging. There's tricks you can do to avoid more downtime, but in our case, it worked for us. There's certain things I think upstream could improve in this process, like when I was going through, oh, this is the neat little pseudocode that you can run for the DB migration. It would be nice if it wasn't all that extra complexity added to it. In addition, backwards compatibility in general. Okay, so I get it. I get that Kilo is broken and is broken forever, and you can't install it. But why do I have to install Kilo to go from Juno to Ocata? Why doesn't Ocata know how to get to Ocata? Why is that code that gets it there just thrown away? Because think about all the things that would fix. So like those bugs in Kilo that in that migration code. Now we can fix those and push them up to the latest branch if those were still kept around, but they're thrown away. And now you don't have to pull down all those different versions. You can just pull down the latest version and upgrade your DB. So we're not done yet. We're going to do these migrations again on much larger clusters and deployments, including our bare metal cluster deployment, which is running Ironic and Neutron. So now we have to figure out how to get those two components up to Ocata version as well. And we're not that lazy. We are going to do the Nova Network to Neutron migration, probably next week. We're looking into that. We're looking at, I think Nectar has written some scripts on this, and CERN has done some really neat work that they presented at this summit as well that we may use. And I think our voices need to be heard. I think this is a really important issue, and there has been a wiki started where you can put your experience doing these upgrades or your feedback or any knowledge you want to share. Because devs are working really hard on these really cool features for you. But if you can't get to the release they're making them for, then you can't use those features. So I think it's important that it's easy and fast to get everyone up to date so that we can start using those cool features. All right, I'm going to open it up to questions now or later. You can email me. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, actually, on the hypervisor, you mentioned you could have migrate, but you didn't.
It would have been more complicated in our case because we were just storing the instances on disk rather than like in a backend like Ceph.
Yeah, but well, I don't know actually about the Juno version, but usually you have block migrate, so it's just gonna copy everything.
Yeah, it would have been possible, but in our case, we didn't. And I mean, there was downtime that was expected and that was acceptable in our case. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a kind of a question. It's kind of a quick share of our experience. We have a private cloud, but it only runs OpenStack Swift plus Keystone as authentication, and we had the same experience as you had when we migrated from Juno up to Ocata. So especially for the database part, and some of the the release, actually the source there actually is end of life. It's really hard to get off it, and then some release say from Juno to Kilo. You are right. So they got a box over there, and then you have to say it's missing a column, and then we have to manually add a column over there and then populate there and get it to work. And then honestly, I still couldn't get the upgrade from Juno to Octa release by release, because in some of those, I think I have to invest tons of time to get those kind of bugs fixed, and then I just gave up that approach, and then I just recreate a brand new Keystone VM, and then with the Octa release there, and then I just recreate the database over there, and then populate the database from Juno, and then that make it work.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Wow.
No, it's not. You cannot copy it. You have to, for us, the database. Is for OpenStack Swift. I know the database structure really well, and then I know, those kind of endpoints, what are supposed to be there, what are the, say the tenants endpoints, right? So what I expect, and then the new data structure over there, and then I know how to, manually to populate those kind of endpoint and the URLs, like public, private, and admin URL manually by myself for each tenant or each project. So then that makes authentication works. And then if and also the catalog of the services are there, so then it runs perfectly. So that saved me tons of time.
Okay, yeah, that's one way to do it. That's kind of embarrassing though to the OpenStack community that it just didn't work at all. Oh wow.
Hi, I'm an operator of a public cloud, and I can relate to your stories for sure, especially the whack-a-mole part.
Yeah.
And hopefully the development community takes this feedback in a positive way. Just wondering, do you have any policies going forward to not let your releases fall behind too far?
Yeah, I mean, we've been trying to reduce the amount of patches that we have. In our case, that's sort of like what you can choose and what you can't choose. Like you can choose to have less patches. You can't control things like if DB migration is hard though. So yeah, that's pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I just mean like if you can stick to a more current release, well, there's still a lot more people out there operating that particular version of OpenStack. Sometimes it makes the upgrade a little less painful because when you fall way behind, you're right, like things get abandoned, things get broken, and then you're stuck. So that was just my experience is we have like a policy basically, like you have to be within 2 releases of the current release.
Right. I don't think we have a hard policy like that, but I mean, if it is easier to upgrade, then when it's smart for us to upgrade, we can do it more easily. So we can do those more frequently as well if they're easier. So, but yeah, we don't have a hard policy like that.
Hi. Did you add any rollback procedure?
Sorry?
Did you add any rollback procedure? What if the upgrade failed? Are you so confident that you don't have any rollback, or?
You back up DBs, right?
Yeah, and you said that you reinstall Rail from 6 to 7.
Yeah.
What if you need to go back?
You install Rail 6.
Yeah.
You just do it. I mean, this has nothing to do with upgrades, right? You're wiping a machine, Rail 6, and then you deploy Juno. Just like the upgrade had nothing to do with upgrades. You're just wiping, go into Rail 7, and deploying Ocata.
I mean, you were trying to have minimal downtime, right? So if you have to roll back, it will take a lot of time, maybe, so...
Yeah, I mean, the plan was not roll back.
Okay.
Fail.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Do you have any customized policy files? That's policy.json?
Oh yeah, everything.
What are your experiences with that, with migrating this?
Yes, that was, like I said, it's the exact same as the configuration. We pretty much just had to rewrite them all, which took a lot of time.
Have you experienced any issues with APIs versioning? Like your monitoring or tools around OpenStack just stopped working?
Well, like I said, like for in our case, things we owned, like the user syncer, we had to fix that. In cases with like people using clients, like command line clients. So what we have is like a host setup that we call the jump box. And people can go in there and just run a command that activates their environment and gives them access to the clients. So since that was centralized, we could just go in there and fix those environment variables, like for Keystone API change version, and like wrap around like if someone ran a Nova command, it would throw some errors like, hey, use the OpenStack command now. And they're like, oh, okay. For anything else, yeah, it was pretty much, broken. Like if you're just like hitting, like if you're running REST calls against us directly, we didn't really support that. So, we put out warning in advance, but they pretty much had to fix those things themselves.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I saw that you used Rail as the operating system. So I suppose it's a binary upgrade of the OpenStack component? Or I want to ask, to where does this OpenStack package come from?
GitHub. So we We have our own build system that pulls down OpenStack components from GitHub and installs them into a virtual environment. I mean, the system does some other things too, like applies patches on top of upstream for all of the hacks that we like, and packages up that VNV into an RPM so it's easy to install. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
I see, if I understand correctly, that you create your own OpenStack package
Yes,
from the source.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, first, congratulations and thank you for sharing. That was awesome.
Thanks.
Second, how do you do your rel upgrades normally? So it's not just in the context of the fast forward upgrade, but in the context of regularly. And how do you manage your downtime just for that?
Yeah, doing a rel upgrade in general, downtime. I was personally not involved in it. This was a pretty big project across like the whole company, the upgrading of everything and that sort of downtime. But I guess it's like any sort of downtime, you just sort of have to orchestrate it correctly. You can't, right? You can't just take everything down at the same time. James looks like he wants to say something. Yeah, go ahead.
Gonna have to crouch down for this thing. All right, so the way we did the upgrade is we did hypervisors first, well in advance. And so as Jacob mentioned, all the VMs were on a separate partition. So we just re-imaged the entire box, save for the partition that the instances are on. And then that makes it easier to go on to RHEL 7. Then when we installed Nova Compute, it's up and running. And that was prior to doing the upgrade. Another question about what do you do to rollback? In that case, we would just reinstall the hypervisors, re-image it as RHEL 6, again, preserving that partition, deploy our old code, and it would work. And then the control plane, it was the same thing. We just re-imaged the hosts with RHEL 7, and if that didn't work, we would have re-imaged back to RHEL 6. The only hosts we didn't re-image were our database nodes, and those we just made a backup of, so in case something went wrong and we needed to roll back the install, we could have just copied the database back and been up and running.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers your question.
All right, cool. Thank you all.